wanted to write something about the 60s that was about the fact that if you're talking about a generation, it doesn't end at Altamont, it doesn't end when Nixon resigns or the Beatles break up. The 60s is like a row of dominoes that knocks over the 70s, 80s, 90s, and right up till today. So I wanted to write about characters who took a left turn in the 60s, thinking they were going to come back and never did. So it's a generational story. The Ravons are the band in the book. They're not very successful. They're kind of like any number of groups who had one or two hits in the 60s and then went their separate ways. In a way, it wasn't that important to me. It sounds funny to say. It wasn't that important to me to write about musicians or about a band. I wanted to write about people whose lives were changed in the 60s and as a result never got back on track. In a funny way, even though the musicians are important characters in the book, they could have been anything. They could have been anybody who, you know, went off to a commune in 1967 and as a result never went back to dental school. Well, the title, Evening's Empire, comes from a line in Mr. Tambourine Man by Bob Dylan. I know that evening's empire has returned into sand. And it struck me as appropriate for a book about a generation who suddenly were shocked to find themselves old and looking back on how they got there and confused about the wrong turns they took. I mean, the idea of evening's empire also works really well with the music business because it is a life that's lived almost entirely at night. You know, people play at night, people go out at night, people stay up all night, people sleep all day. And, you know, evening's empire is kind of a beautiful construct, but ultimately, inevitably, the morning comes and people see each other in the cold light of day, and sometimes it's not as pretty as they thought it was when it was under the spotlight. There's a song by the Faces called Ooh La La, written by Ronnie Lane and Ronnie Wood. I wish that I knew what I know now when I was younger. And I thought of that song a lot when I was writing the book. In a way, that's the story of the book. It's an old man looking back at his adventures as a young man, starting in the 60s. And that feeling of kind of nostalgia mixed with regret, memories of some things that are painful, but all in all, he wouldn't change a thing. So Ooh La La played through my head a lot when I was putting the book together. I kind of hate to talk about the book in the context of the 60s because I run under the bed when people start talking about the 60s, but in a way it's a book about the fact that if you're going to talk about a generation, you're going to have to follow it all the way through. This is a 50-year story, really. And I think it's only now that we can start to get some perspective. It was only, you know, about 5 years ago that I started thinking, you know, the shape of this whole journey is now becoming apparent. These stories are still unfolding, and it's only now, it's only when people get to the end of their lives that you can really get some perspective on whether the changes and the sacrifices and the opportunities and the left turns they took were worth it.